I think there's a prime directive, like kind of like in Star Trek. I think when you reach a certain point, maybe that's not the development of nukes, but maybe that's us throwing the nukes away. That becomes like, oh, welcome to the family type deal. You know, the reason I think another reason to support that it might be a system, at least 50% of it, you know, maybe there are rogue entities coming here that are, you know, that look like giant cats or something. I don't know. But I think for the most part, there is a system we're interacting with. And if you were to do genetic modifications, you might need some type of biological drone in order to do that. That is part of the system. So now we have these genderless grays taking people, telling them the same things over and over. We're not going to hurt you, proceed to hurt you, show you how bad you are to the planet, and then put you right back in your bed. And, you know, like this kind of like system over and over and over. Now, these ships don't have toilets. They don't have kitchens. They don't have pictures hanging on the wall.
Is that just because we haven't, from the people who have described them and claim they've been in them, they haven't ever seen those things?
I mean, yeah, but you can also look at people like Bob Lazar. If you believe what he says, like, you know, it's barren. These things have nothing in them, no controls even, and just seats, you know, although he didn't go on the top floor of this UFO, you know, for him, there was no control area. And then you look at some other cases where people talk about how these beings interact sort of psychically or psionically with the technology, and that without the beings, these crafts can't actually function. These beings are like a part of the craft. They're interacting with like maybe the microtubules in their brain and to interact with like this quantum field that, you know, the UFO lives in. I don't know. But that, if I were this system, if I were this like AI system in place and a UFO crashed, I wouldn't be too worried. Because as soon as the being dies, you can't fly the craft anyways. And I think that's what's been happening. I think a lot of the stuff, if there is recovery stuff, which I believe there is, I think we're just dealing with their tech that we can't do anything with. And that's why they're not too worried about it.
Did you know that 1 in 8 Americans are currently prescribed anti-anxiety medications? It is a quiet epidemic that is sweeping the West right now. And people who start on these medications have a very hard time quitting. Recovering from benzodiazepine addiction or alcohol addiction is essentially like recovering from brain damage. But what if I told you that a legal mushroom that has been weirdly embedded into our culture is helping people to finally get off these GABAergic substances? I'm talking about Amanita muscaria, the little red top mushroom with the white dots that's depicted in Alice in Wonderland and Mario. This is a legal mushroom to buy, possess, and sell in every state except Louisiana. And thousands of people are using it to get off benzodiazepines and alcohol. This mushroom isn't only for people looking to quit their anti-anxiety medications. People are tapping into its power as a natural nootropic for focus during studies and work, a non-addictive alcohol replacement at parties, a dream-enhancing tool for vivid nights, and even a gentle aid for pain recovery. For years, there was a massive gap in the market where nobody in the United States was reliably importing this mushroom. That's where Minnesota Nice comes in, providing you with the highest quality raw Amanita and consumer-ready Amanita products at a price that you can afford. So use Minnesota Nice to help find your harmony today. You can go to www.mnniceethno.com/Julian. That link is in my description below, and use code JD22 for 22% off your first order. That's www.mnniceethno.com/Julian. Link in description below, and use code JD22 for 22% off.
And the problem though is that would signify that we are so far behind them, which actually this isn't a problem. This would make sense now I'm thinking about it. We're so far behind them that it doesn't even matter to them. They're like, oh, they got one of our,
don't care.
Yeah, don't worry about it. The way you describe like just picking up dirt from, you know, one of 100 billion exoplanets or something like that, and we happen to be that could make sense, even though in our world, we're trying to figure out how to colonize Mars just to get people there that they could survive and not die on the place.
That's right.
These guys could be so far ahead that they have 100 billion Marses that they've already made Earths.
Well, even better than that, because if you were trying to preserve the seed of human life, or the flame, right? The flame of consciousness that we're trying to keep alive. You know, we're trying to be interstellar. We're trying to go to Mars and do all these things. Well, if you had that technology, you wouldn't be looking for barren radioactive rocks. You know, like living underground or in a bubble doesn't sound like a lot of fun. Instead, you would find exoplanets that can already harbor some type of primitive life and then genetically modify it with your own DNA so that you're preserving your seed. in these other planets, and then just monitor them with your system. And every 1,000 years, you come down in a chariot of fire, and or a fiery wheel from the sky, and you give them metallurgy, or you give them religion, or you give them, agriculture, and you allow them to sort of, grow as you're just checking up on them. Religion is important to build society. Without religion, we wouldn't have Rome, right? And Rome was like one of the first major, powers of the world. Before that, everything was tribal.
Yeah.
Before that, small villages would get together and they were fighting over power, and they would never flourish. So it was due to religion that we have modern society today. Like, it's a very important thing that was introduced into our civilization that allowed us to have a bigger sort of colony with consequences and everything. Now, is religion still, valuable today? That's debatable. But I think at the time, it was extremely valuable in order to start civilization.
Would they give us religion because they, in their advanced civilization, this is a hypothetical question,
sure,
I guess, in your opinion, they as an advanced civilization experience religion themselves, whatever their version of it is, and so they know the power that type of thing, like a lower level of it, I guess in this case, can hold over society when you give them complete unknowns because they can't know nearly as much as we, the aliens in this case, know?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, how do pets, how do they think? What do they think about us? They might consider us some type of god that can summon food all the time. We don't know that, right? So we know what's best for them. The way that they interpret us, is up to how we present ourselves. Yeah. Because we're just so much more advanced. So I think if you were to seed the universe, you would need several ingredients. And then I think there's a prime directive, like kind of like in Star Trek. I think when you reach a certain point, maybe that's not the development of nukes, but maybe that's us throwing the nukes away. That becomes like, oh, welcome to the family type deal. The reason I think another reason to support that it might be a system, at least 50% of it. Maybe there are rogue entities coming here that are, that look like giant cats or something. I don't know. But I think for the most part, there is a system we're interacting with. But one of the reasons I think we're interacting with a system is because it seems like every time we have a war, every time we have any type of strife, we start seeing orbs or Foo Fighters or what have you, or flaps over, in DC and whatnot. And so, you look at things like perhaps SkyWatcher and what they're doing. I wouldn't put it past them to simulate war games out in these ranges with Northrop Grumman, right? The CIA was doing it, according to Lou, Project Interloper, where they were dragging nukes out in the middle of the ocean to try and, attract these things. Right. If you're an intelligent species, these aren't fish, dude. These aren't fish. Like, so whatever is, if you're blowing stuff up, like you look at Skinwalker, right? They're throwing rockets in the air, and that's where the phenomenon shows up. Maybe that's just like some type of response system, some immune response that's like, hey, what are you guys doing? Not necessarily the intelligence behind the AI, but just that like automatic. And we found a way to sort of short circuit that and make them appear through these, through these events. And then on the other side of that, I think, you get people like Chris Bledsoe or, even Dorothy Izat in Canada, where the opposite happens, where like, these psionic assets as well, they claim that beaming out like pure love and whatever will attract them, right? So maybe there's two sides to that. Maybe it's like, oh, if we're bad to each other, they show up to try and shut it down. But maybe if we start being good to each other, that's where they show up and they're like, hey, welcome to the family. Like, who knows?
You talked to Bledsoe on your show.
Yeah.
Right. What do you think of that story?
I think initially something did happen. I think there are classic marks of an abduction. I do think he was taken. He even says he was taken. But if you look at the case, there are 3 other witnesses that saw these glowing orbs. They didn't see him take him or any of that, but they were present during the arrival of these things, and were being apparently chased in their pickup trucks by these glowing molten, orbs. And so I do think initially something happened. After that, I think, it's a matter of taking him at his word, and as someone who's researching, that's hard for me to just put all my eggs into. I'm open to the idea, and I'm happy to shelve that or file that, catalog that information.
Yeah.
For instance, the date, April 2027, we're talking Easter 2020 or 2026 actually. So I'm like, all right, we'll put that in that category and see what happens.
Yeah.
Right. But I don't think it's healthy to say I believe or I don't believe. I think that sort of binary thinking is what prevents data collection. I think if we do that, we automatically filter all information, whether we believe or don't believe. We filter the information that comes through. I'd rather create a space, a safe zone for everybody to speak, take the information judgment-free, allow them to really tell whatever they want to say, and then parse through the information myself over time and hold it up against other connections I might make. So
yeah, that's one of the things I like about you. Like, your shit, and you bring in all these different people. You've had in all like the biggest names. There's still a few more on the list you got to get in. I'm sure you'll get them in at some point. But like, you let them go through the whole story. You ask them step by step what happened. It's like getting it down on documented record. And also, by the way, the production of your show is amazing.
Thanks.
Bro. Like it looks
Appreciate
incredible. But like, you also, as a fan of this thing, you want the truth. You want to know, all right, what are we hearing from the government that's real? What seems to be bullshit? And like, I've seen you comment on some of those things while still like maintaining of like trying not to, make enemies out of people or do stuff like that, which I think is great. But it is a tough job because it's a space where the unknown unknowns are so vast. We're even like beyond hypotheticals to a point there that you are going to run, just statistically, you're going to run into a lot of stories that end up being total bullshit.
absolutely,
and then it's like, is that a part of the plot? Is that a part of the thing where it's like, all right, this is how you poison the well. You throw Jason Sands in there, and then the people that believe that, it's like, see, hey, look, they'll believe anything. You know what I mean?
Could be. That's absolutely right. And if you were to do that, you don't even need to do that purposely. People do that on their own without even realizing it.
Yeah.
I'll take it in the context of like a magic trick, for instance.
You're pretty good at that.
Pretty good at that, yeah. And there's a lot of correlation between how someone experiences a magic trick versus how they experience the phenomenon. And so, magicians know this, but as soon as you perform to somebody, we kind of stick around because what we do during our performances, for the most part, there's a lot of stuff involved, with sleight of hand, misdirection, showmanship, all this stuff, and suggestion and whatnot. But one thing that happens is the engineering of memory. That's the main component of a magic trick, which is why it doesn't always work best on camera. It's always better to do live because looking back, you might be like, oh, there was this little offbeat moment that didn't seem important that I forgot about.
Yeah.
That's now on camera. And so magicians will take a piece of information that isn't important, right? Make it seem really important, and then take a piece of information that is absolutely critical to the magic trick working and dismissing it as if it's nothing, being very flippant about it. So your brain is just going to take the big pieces, but it doesn't have time or storage to remember all the tiny nonsense that we threw aside. And so the memory you have instantly of the trick is different than what happened instantly. And that happens with experiencers as well. It happens with everybody. They're not unique in this, in that if I want to tell you what I felt during a magic trick, I will embellish for two reasons. One, I don't want you to think that I'm easily fooled, right? So I will just round off the edges a little bit more, and I'll think nothing of it. They're like, no, these edges don't really matter. No one's going to notice. And it's just kind of like, no, it didn't make a sound, but you were in your car. How do you know it did make a sound? No, we had the window down. So you'll round off the edges a little bit. And then secondly, firstly, you don't want to appear foolish. But secondly, I think the more, how do I put this? The more you experience magic or like the phenomenon, like this stuff starts to like, your reality is malleable, like from the get-go. Everything we experience,
100%.
Your sight, the sound, and everything. And so as soon as someone else can have agency over that for you, I mean, nothing should be taken into account, right? It's not admissible. It shouldn't be admissible in anything. Memory is so bad, and we can play around with it. So I think for those reasons, I think experiencers as well. And here's the second reason. They want you to feel like you were there. That's the other thing, right? So if I'm doing a magic trick, I'm gonna try and say, oh, it was amazing. He was this high off the ground. When in reality it was like this high, right? But I want you to feel like you were there. I'm not trying to give you data. I'm trying to give you emotion so that you feel it, right? So an experiencer might do the same thing. They might be like, no, it was like the hair was standing up on my head. It's like, well, how do you know that? You can't see your hair.
They're trying to re-feel like they were there, which means it may not be a perfect rendition of it, you're saying.
Yeah, they're trying to make you feel what they felt, which is a human thing to do. It has nothing to do with lying, has nothing to do with being, just not telling the truth. It has everything to do with human connection.
Yes.
And so, through that, you have to filter the experiences, and it's impossible to do so.
Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.